and
Nice to meet you.
and
Tell me how to
and
pronounce your first name.
so it's supposed to be Darwin, like Charles Darwin, like the
Okay.
evolution
Yep.
theory. It's
Hmm.
just that long story short, I'm from the Dominican Republic, and
Mm.
they, for some reason, didn't know how to write it when I was
Ah.
born. So they just put Guin, and actually, if you
Mm.
have Guin and you put the apostrophe on the U, it sounds like win, Darwin.
Okay. Yeah. Hmm.
So yeah, and now I have a junior, my son, and I was
Hmm.
supposed to fix my mistakes, right? Isn't that what we do? Try to fix our
Sure.
mistakes with our children. So I was
Yeah.
gonna fix the W, put the W in, and the boss didn't like it. She said he wouldn't really be a junior if we
Uh,
fixed it. So then the mistake is no longer. It's actually conscious decision. So that's what that the name. And it was literally was because of Charles Darwin. That's where I got the name
mhm.
from. Yeah,
Nice to meet you, Darwin.
nice to meet you.
Actually, I like that story because it's how to transform a mistake into something intentional.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So there are forces around us. So it's like, well, the tradition. So I hope he doesn't have a third, right? Like, so it's like Darwin the third. It's like, where do you get that name from? So so glad we can connect. I'm part of the small firm exchange, as you know, and
Mhm.
on the small firm exchange, there's different, like, I guess, task groups that we are part of, and the ones that intrigued me the most was one was the basically the marketing part, which is we manage the small firm exchange Instagram. We
Mhm.
post on the Flipboard and things like that. So that part, the outreach group, was great. And then the other one was in the international practice side of things. Given that I consider Flow an international practice, even though we don't have offices anywhere else, but the
Mhm.
people that we have are from everywhere. I mean, Dominican
Sure. Yeah.
Republic, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Salvador, you know, uh, um, we have people, like, everybody's from another place, so
Yeah.
that sort of intrigued me, and we are more interested into that global thinking type of running a practice, not just here local. So and we've done work in the Dominican Republic, and Julio co-founded a firm in Mexico that does
Mhm.
work there, so we collaborate as much as we can possibly collaborate. So I thought that was relevant, relevant to us as a practice, as a diverse practice that cares a lot about that global, environment,
Mhm.
and wanted to know more about it. So that was the itch, So I wanted to know more about, like, what is this? What am I
Right.
supposed to
Sure.
do? Is there something I'm supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And how can I? Because the point is also so that these elements can be brought to the national from the
Mhm.
small firm side, right? Like any concerns, anything that seem to matter, so that we can bring it to AA national.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, that all sounds great. So a little background on the Global Practice Committee. Well, first, um, it's kind of a minor thing, but an important thing. We changed our name at the end of last year. So for a long time, we were called the International Practice Committee,
Mhm.
and at some point in time, it was the term advisory group was added to that. And I'm the wrong person to ask because even though I've been a member of the AIA for the better part of 20 years,
Mhm.
my involvement at the national level is fairly recent. I
Mhm.
joined the committee in 2020, and I'm now chairing it this year. But some form of an international committee has existed within the AIA for about 100 years.
Mhm.
I think it might have had different names and different functions over time. Um, and for the period of time, it was called the International Practice Committee Advisory Group. Oh, I remember it was originally the International Committee, and
Mhm.
then it became the International Practice Committee for reasons I don't know, and then the advisory group thing came on. Anyhow, the if it was supposed to be advising the board on international practice issues related
Mhm.
to policies about trade, about continuing education and licensure, things that from an AIA national perspective seem to be relevant.
Mhm.
And as you're probably aware, over the past few years, there's been an interesting shift within AIA. One, to begin to focus more on the term global than on international, because international tends to suggest you have domestic practice and international practice. And unlike what you were just saying, a lot of people seem to think that the two never really overlap, which I totally do not believe, and I know you don't either. Mm-hmm. But also, there's a number of AIA chapters around the world, like in the United Kingdom. There's an AIA Central Europe. There's an AIA Middle East. Some of them are country-based. Some of them are almost like city-based, like AIA Hong Kong or AIA Shanghai. And some are country-based, like AIA Japan. And those are chapters that have a robust enough AIA membership that it makes sense to call them a chapter and treat them like the Boston Society of Architects or whatever. But there was also this kind of more nebulous thing called the AIA International Region, which is sort of a catch-all for AIA members not in the United States who didn't fall into one of those international chapters. And that the so-called International Region reformed, and it's not quite finished yet, but it's almost done at this point. Yeah. It's now called AIA International, and that body is itself a chapter of the AIA. So that shift alone kind of demonstrates, I think, an evolution in thinking within AIA National, the Washington, D.C. based kind of home office, so to speak, where there's more and more of a kind of a consciousness that the AIA needs to be thought about as a global enterprise. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have tens of thousands of members in the U.S. that need to be looked after in terms of continuing education and other benefits of AIA membership, but let's also start to focus on the AIA's global reach and what we have to offer the world market in terms of importing services, exporting services, collaborations between US-based firms and overseas firms that have multiple offices in multiple countries, small firms like you and me who also do international or global practice. There's actually quite a diversity in terms of the practice types that exist, in terms of global practice. So we're now the Global Practice Committee, which I think reflects some of that evolution, but also begins to reflect kind of this thinking about practice as not being kind of bifurcated between domestic and international, but thinking about we have global problems, we need global solutions, architects have to be part of that process. But also still having a focus on the specific challenges of whether I'm a US architect working overseas or some of our members are American, but I'm thinking of one in particular who I was talking to this morning, who's going to be our chair next year. He's from Alabama. He moved to Shanghai, started a practice there. He's very active in AIA Shanghai. And then there's people who are members of multi-office, multinational firms who may have left the U.S. and are now stationed in, say, Bahrain, working for a company there. And there's all sorts of other, versions of that in between. And our committee actually has a pretty interesting range of folks, including architects who were born in other countries who have moved to the U.S., become naturalized, started their own practices, but still have a strong presence. I'm thinking of one colleague who is based in Atlanta, but he's from Cameroon, and he's doing work in Cameroon and goes back and forth while still doing a lot of work here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So I think global practice as a committee is a pretty big tent in terms of diversity of people, diversity of practices, geographical diversity. And we're really focused right now on a range of issues around practicing globally. That includes developing a regional strategy framework where, and this is kind of more in the nitty gritty of what's AIA looking to do as an institution. How is the institute looking to expand its global reach? And so we're authoring almost like a briefing paper that's in some cases country specific, but we're identifying regions where we think the AIA wants to grow its membership. And we're starting to work up kind of a 2 to 3 page summary of either the region as a whole or in some cases going into specifics of countries, like in the Middle East or the Middle East, North Africa region. We have summaries for Lebanon, the UAE. I'm not going to remember all the countries, but I think there were 5 or 6 countries that volunteers within the Aia International community have stepped up and offered, in terms of kind of knowledge sharing and helping to author this. So we're in the process of developing this further. We're going to focus on Africa as well as probably one of the initial. Of course, Africa is a big region. Sub-Saharan Africa,
I know, right? Yeah,
huge region, is really probably 5 sub-regions at least, but that's probably one that we're going to focus on as well this year. And one of the things that I'm, as chair and as a member from the previous 2 years, and spearheading, is the development of a national network of similar committees that exist at the chapter level. So the Boston Society of Architects has the Global Practice Network. AIA San Francisco has an international committee. There's something similar in Seattle. There's one in New York. And right now we have Boston, Seattle, and San Francisco signed up. I'm hoping to get New York and Chicago on board and basically convene a roundtable that might get together, say, twice a year at the bare minimum, just to kind of share what's going on within the chapters. What kinds of issues are they discussing? What are global practitioners in those parts of the country concerned about, thinking about? But also for the Global Practice Committee at AIA to begin to develop a pipeline for inviting new members and helping to kind of sustain the committee, because up to this point it's been a little bit of a microcosm of the way the AIA has functioned historically, which is it's a little bit of an old boys club, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like people have their own networks, and so they know certain people, and like the same groups of people, keep getting invited to the same parties, and we want to kind of make this a little more inclusive.
Well, that happens a lot in a lot of different things too. So it's like it's almost on public work. The same guy, it's like the same people get the same invitations for most of those RFPs, and there is a momentum for change on that aspect across the board, actually. So I think that it's like it's like an opportunistic time for all of that to start breaking. Even I got invited to become part of the Young Architect Forum too, because somebody told me, well, Darwin, you're a different face. We don't have as many people as that care, and really want to make an impact. And I'm like, I can't do it all now because we're not many, right? So that pipeline needs to keep growing, because they're like, I can't do Young Architect Forum, Small Firm Exchange, and all of these different things. But definitely a change is happening, so that's important. And there's there's value propositions to that too. It's like you just said it. Even connecting twice a year on a round table, I'll tell you, there's a whole lot that will come out of it for the better of the community, right? So so things that you wouldn't even think of, into how to run a practice, how things are being done, of course not talking about pricing, the antitrust part, but not about fees, but everything else that you can do that, ties back into what the AIA is trying to do now. Because I was part of that meeting, I think it was 3 weeks ago, where all the AIA, it was like the national Zoom meeting, diversity and all of these different things that now are really, climate change is now, it's not just a word, it's a commitment now. Who is signing up for that? So it's so there may be solutions that come out of that global thinking, the way of thinking. So yeah, that's really, really cool stuff. Yeah.
So tell me, Darwin, with the Small Practice Exchange, are you the chair, or how's it organized?
So we probably, as just like everything else in AIA, have shifted from regional representative to like state representative and board members. So I am a board member, and there's not a board member for each state, I don't think, but there is an aspiration to have a state representative for every state. And the board members are about 3 years, I believe it is, that you go for. So this is my first year, and then and yeah, so that's how it's been divided. So, but this year I happen to also be a board member and a state rep, just not for the same state. So
Hmm.
Massachusetts had a lot of candidates for the state rep sort of position. So Rebecca is her name. She's the state rep that was selected. But Maine, for instance, didn't have anybody apply for the state rep position. So I'm
Okay.
now sort of holding that spot. And my role there is to actually secure a spot for some, from someone from Maine, but not just anybody, but somebody that really will be engaged in the process. And it turns out that most firms in Maine are actually small firms,
Right.
so
Yeah,
they
I'm
don't
not surprised.
have a small firm exchange group. Like for instance, the BSA has one.
Hmm. Hmm.
What is a small practice network? I
Small
think.
practice network, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
yeah. So they have that. And and at the beginning, I was actually gonna engage into talking with them so that I knew more about what's going on locally. But I'm like, well, Darwin, you're just a board member. You're not the state rep. So the state rep is doing that role. So we're learning a little bit about what
Hmm.
the roles are. And I was like, well, I still do want to be involved. And they're like, well, in that case, you should be involved, not just because I'm, Maine, because I'm the state rep, but also it wouldn't just be the BSA, right? Like it actually would be all the different chapters within Massachusetts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which I didn't know how many there were, so I'm learning a whole lot.
Hmm.
But my role really is that of creating like a connection between small practices within Maine and I guess also Massachusetts, and and some places don't have that local sort of a small firm exchange. So creating that, we have like a little sort of how to make a local chapter, toolkit, so that's like step by step what it is, from naming it, from how, when to meet and things like that, like, right. So we have that, and we then bring it all back to Aia National. We have meetings in person once a year, and
Hmm.
I believe it's every other week we have one sort of get together where we provide feedback and discuss a topic of interest that we've all thought was important to discuss. At some point we spoke about antitrust, so that was
Hmm.
one, right? So what can we say and what can we not say, and and we actually spoke with the attorney. I don't know, I forget his name for AIA, but
Oh, yeah.
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 So he helped us out understand a lot of different things. And then we had another session with that spoke about, it was really cool stuff. It was AIA Trust, but it was also talking about the different programs, AI in architecture. Like it was really a broad sort of great meeting, but we got to learn a lot about different things. So that's kind of how it goes. So there's the two. So we meet every other week as just board members, and then we also meet with the state reps.
Hmm.
So that's another meeting. So there's that time commitment and energy, put into it. So we, as I said, run the SFX Instagram, and try to really have a lot of small practices be showcased,
Hmm.
and develop like a set of tools that will help small practices, from how to open a practice, which is something that the Young Architect Forum is really interested in. So we're gonna cross pollinate on that, and innovative ways of running a small practice. We even spoken about different modes of operations, like you know a practice that has 1099s, versus
Hmm.
full-time staff, and processes and things like that. Very intriguing stuff. Flow design itself is, I would say, one of, I worked at like 9 different offices, and I launched Flow with my partner, and I think we're
Hmm.
probably ahead of the curve on a lot of the way that we do things, and the processes that we use. Of course, there's a lot of room for learning and improvement, but so that's some of the things that we've been talking about.
Hmm.
Overcoming the challenge of even like connecting with some local chapters. Like, Massachusetts is great, like we're very engaged, but like, North Carolina and South Carolina, for instance,
Hmm.
many of the members are AI members because but they don't really care. It's like, well,
Mhm.
so they, so connecting with them, how can we listen to you if you don't even participate in,
Mhm.
and then, so we've been trying to figure out ways of engaging more with the small practices in, nationally, and that's been interesting. So again, it's really great. But my core reason for being here, to be honest, is because there are not many diversity sort of members or pioneers in the community, right?
Mhm.
So, and flow design at its core is focused on developing the pipeline, the next generation of architects. So that's kind of why every desk is basically somebody from another place.
Mhm.
Everybody here. So we're 10. Um, we do happen to have 4 Dominicans now, but we were one person from a different state, from a different country. Everybody, different language, different everything. And we go to middle schools and high schools and the Boston Architectural College to speak and to show ourselves, because the more they see us, the more we are aware, the more we're aware, the more that's a possibility, and people get
Mhm.
inspired. So middle
Mhm.
schools and preschools are the best, because that's where change really begins, right? That's
Mhm.
so we try to do that. COVID, that hurt a lot of that
Oh
desire
yeah.
to engage with those younger generations. um but and we try to do it all the way from, again, middle school, preschool, high school, college, and post college. Like, we have the ARE success class, I call it, Mondays and Tuesdays, where from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m. I talk to people. Whoever wants to, they can DM me, and I add them to our Zoom links, and I showed him how to pass the exams. And I did it with 5.0 version, so it's a newer one, so I understand them. And other guys, like a lot of people, actually have graduated from it and are actually licensed, which
Mhm.
is great. And they come in and lecture into how they did it, what they did, without disclosing any content or anything like that. So that, because again, that pipeline is got to be endorsed and supported throughout, right? And
Mhm.
it's a time commitment. There's financial commitment, but Flow does it because our firm went from, again, 2 people in a basement to 11 within 5 years, and it's
Wow.
because there is a value proposition to it, and that came about from I went to the AIA conference in Las Vegas 3 years ago. I think it was before COVID.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
2019. Yeah, I think it was 2019.
yeah, and then I also went to the Licensing Advisor Summit in Minneapolis, and they were talking about diversity, and they were talking about something that clicked on me, and is that diverse teams, well managed, outperform any other team.
Mhm.
Sadly, most of them are not well managed, so they underperform every other team. So you might as well keep the same people together, because they will do okay. So, but knowing that spike on performance is substantial, that started to click on me, because that's how we've been getting to where we are. That's how we've become very well known, very well respected. We've partnered and connected with Perkins and Will, Gensler, Dream Collaboratives, Moody Nolan. Like, people really want to work with us, and and they've seen the value to that, right? We're very, very good connecting with communities like Dorchester, Charlestown, Mattapan. Like, we go there and we're not strangers. They look at all of us and they're like, and we're not designing for, we're designing with, and from
Mhm.
within. So that starts, that really, all of the friction is taken away. There's only the judicial paperwork friction that, you know Boston has, and many municipalities have, which is,
Mm,
the
yeah.
way that they operate. But then once you're welcomed, and you can create very innovative and creative design solutions with the community, then the systems have to adapt, right, to the people.
Mhm.
So that's kind of why we're here. That's why I'm part of the SFX. That's why I'm trying to be part of as many opportunities as possible, and deliver the projects and all this stuff. We're all busy, of course, but yeah. So that's, that global thinking, I guess, tying it together with this, it's the only way, right? That's the way we
Mhm.
do things now. So that's how we operate. Yeah.